Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
And our co-host, Rich Gear, here with you as well. We are going to continue a show, or a subject that we started last week, about spiritual gifts, and there are all different kinds of them, and we went through a whole litany of them. This week, Doug, we want to go through what, the gifts of the Holy Spirit? Is that what we want to do?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that. These are the gifts from God that are a little bit more supernatural in nature.
Well, they seem overtly supernatural. The only problem, the reason why that is because some of the, what's the old thing, familiarity breeds contempt maybe, or not really. A lot of things we do oftentimes are ignored that are just because they're commonplace. Gifts and abilities that people have, that everyone seems to have, we ignore how really special and how amazing they really are, that they exist at all. I mean, but these are uniquely given to the church, and Paul lists 9 of them. Okay, and there's debates on what some of them all actually mean, because he doesn't really define what they do. Some of them are fairly easy. Obviously, Doug, do you want to go through the litany of some of them?
Yeah,
or
let's see if we can remember what they are from scratch.
We're going to do this winging this with no notes here. We're just going to try to get this, and I think we can do this. But if we miss one or two, we'll hear from the audience maybe. Okay.
It talks about wisdom and knowledge being two of them, and there's a little bit of a fine line between the two of them.
Yeah, you know what I thought? I think, well, you know what the difference in wisdom and knowledge is? Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing it isn't. Okay?
That's pretty good, yeah.
You know? That's something I came up with a while back. But the point of it is that there are things that knowledge you know based on facts or information. In the supernatural gift, though, Doug, we've seen that the word of knowledge does something very amazing, and it almost borders on what, well, a lot of people think more like prophetic gifts. People used to call words of knowledge things where they would know some kind of a sickness you have, or some kind of an affliction or an issue, or something that you need to have resolved in your life, or that you've been looking to see answered by prayer, and suddenly you will know that's like people have used the expression for me, Doug, like they've read my mail, and
right.
and it's an amazing thing how it just comes up. Wisdom is more like Solomonic type gifting, where you know how to answer, how to take a course of action.
It's a practical application of knowledge.
I think it is in a lot of respects, but it's usually very special to a unique situation. So, but you're right about the fine line. We used to debate about, well, what's the difference between that? And I guess, like I say, my tomato analogy sort of in a naturalistic sort of setting kind of maybe gives an idea of it. But
both of these are supernatural in nature. They are a gift that comes from God, that He imparts you with these ability to take, He'll give you information. That's knowledge.
Yep.
But He'll also give you the ability to apply that in a special way, and that's wisdom. And this is something that Solomon, when he became king, that was the first thing he prayed for, is that God would give him wisdom.
And the first part, and God really blessed him with everything else that he didn't ask for, because he asked for that first. And the Lord is very, very keen for us to ask for wisdom. New Testament, the book of James, it says, ask for wisdom, and don't doubt. You want to have that ability to know how to act and function in the kingdom. But it's amazing. Sometimes, Doug, I've run into the supernatural gift of wisdom when I've seen some young kids say something. Wow, how did you know that's amazing. Where did that come from? And even people in the world sometimes will see some of this stuff happen, and they'll go, where did that come from? But in the church, it's very much used to build up the church, to build up individual members of the body of Christ, so that we can become a stronger, cohesive whole. And oftentimes, Doug, I think really in recent years, we probably need to pray a lot more for that. That supernatural gifting and that kind of stuff.
Mention this book. I wasn't going to, but the event that caused Dr. Damadian to invent the MRI.
Yes.
He was talking about his experience where he was trying to raise the funds for his project to build this new machine.
Yeah.
and he came across all this opposition, and it turned out that he needed $150,000 to build this particular thing. And it was the magnet that really was expensive.
Oh, yeah, it would be.
It was a special kind of wire that he had to get that was superconducting, and it was, I think it was a special alloy that he needed in order to make it work.
Okay.
And so here he was trying to wonder why, or how he was going to raise all this money, and the only thing all he had was $15,000 in his budget.
He had 10% of what he needed, huh?
Well, it turned out that somebody came up to him and said, "Well, we have the situation here. Are you trying to compete with Westinghouse?" And he said, "No." Well, it says Westinghouse is just decided to get out of this electromagnet business, and they're selling all their supplies for their magnets on 10 cents on the dollar.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so he got all the materials that he needed for his project, for his magnet, for $15,000, which was exactly his budget.
Wow. Now Doug, what would you put that? I wouldn't.
That one would have been a word of knowledge, because his father-in-law was actually praying for him at this particular situation. And at this time, Dr. Damanian was a little away from the Lord. But it was this event that caused him to really reconsider his position, and not only as a Christian, but as a creation scientist.
Yep.
And so I thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, we're going to do a show on him in a little bit, but not this week. That's just a little. So, Doug, we have wisdom and knowledge. What else do we have?
Discernment would be another one.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine that he used to think that discernment, it's more than just figuring out what's right and wrong, although that's an element of it. He also believed that it had to do a lot with whether you're dealing with demonic, human, or God activity. You could actually know, in fact, many times people with the gift of discernment can actually see into the other realm. Right. They can actually see demonic or even angelic beings and they can tell who's sending the messages out. I mean, sometimes you can know just by the way it's acting, but sometimes the demonic activity can be very, very subtle. I remember one time, Doug, this may be a gift of knowledge as well as discernment. I remember, and this is going to sound really strange. We're talking about, normally we talk about creation, more science type stuff, or more practical type things, but we're dealing with a biblical worldview here. Right. And I remember one time, Doug, I was in a house of a guy, and this was a very strange thing. And people might turn off the TV show now, Doug. Sorry, but I'm going to go for it. But there was a deadbolt door, and it popped open. And boy, I felt something right around the back of my neck, and it was just horrible. And one of the guys suddenly got up and started running, grabbed his head and started running out the door. And you know who it was, Yeah. And the dog started attacking the window. And I looked at this guy, the house who it was his parents' house at the time. But I said, Jerry, I says, do you have a Ouija board in this house? Now, what does that have to do with anything that we were just dealing? But in the realm of supernatural events, oftentimes you open doors to demonic activity. And Jerry looked at me like, well, yeah, but what's that got to do with this? I said, what? And he goes, yeah. And he said, well, somewhere in our basement, he had one of those, I call them a hoarder basements. You know what I mean? He's got all kinds of crap laying around everywhere. He said, somewhere down there, but it's buried. We got to go find it. I don't know why I felt that imminent, but I went downstairs, and Doug, everything was pushed aside, and in the middle of the room was a Ouija board, right in the middle of the room. And that was very scary. And we took it out and actually to put the torch to it. But it opened the door, literally in this case, for demonic activity. And I didn't see a spirit, but I felt it and knew then. So this is kind of a discernment of what was really going on here that would allow the door. And of course, the person who was there, unfortunately, Doug, his spirit was open to demonic activity. because of his own life, and we found this out later on. It was a very tragic end to unfortunately, several years later. But that being said, though, there are things that were going on that we could see. I could tell you another story of a woman, and they were in a prayer thing, and they started laughing, and she started laughing, and nobody could figure out why. And it was like for like 30, 40 minutes they were praying in a prayer meeting. This is back in the old Jesus freak days, Doug, you know. And finally, after it was over, and everybody said, well, what did you start laughing for? She goes, well, you know, we were praying really intensely, and then it started getting more intense, and I looked up and I saw this really nasty-looking, green, nasty-looking demon trying to like scratch its way into the window. Now, nobody saw this except her. And then I saw this big hand come down, like flicking a booger, and just popped him off the window. And when and everybody started laughing again, but it's like she saw this thing, and I go, I mean, this is hilarious. But the reality is, Christ has the power over demons. We read it in the scriptures, and we should not be surprised when those kinds of things actually do happen, especially in the world that we live today. And discernment is very critical. It's really to know when someone is speaking out of your soul, out of the soul, which is human generated, out of the God. Is it God infused, or is it demonic infused? Discernment is one of those wonderful gifts for that.
Exactly, and discernment, especially if you know the voice of the Lord Himself, you know, and how He will enter into a situation and actually make it all brand new. That is when you begin to know Him and know that you know Him. And know that He is the Lord. You know, all the supernatural. There's the fake supernatural, and there's the good supernatural. And
there's the counterfeit that is supernatural but not good. I mean, we get into one of the other gifts. We'll you know, a couple of other ones. There are counterfeits of the real stuff, anyway. And
we talk about healing and miracles, which are two of the other ones.
Right.
And those two gifts actually often go hand in hand, because a miracle is where you're actually creating something out of nothing. You're doing where God does an event, and this is not scientific, of course, because you usually can't repeat this.
We actually admit this, that there are things in nature and in life that are not repeatable. And by nature, even if they take place in the physical world, they're not scientific based on the premise of what science is about. They're not testable or repeatable. But there are events like that, Doug. We can't repeat where the wind is going to blow this week or next week. We can maybe come up with some theories where we can maybe think something's going to happen. But I mean, look at Doug. If we were so scientific, how do all these global warming models always seem to go wrong? They can't even predict the weather 5 days in advance or a day in advance. Some of the one hurricane that was supposed to destroy Mexico recently and didn't even touch it, you know. And
well, you know what happened with that?
What happened with that?
John Pendleton was down there.
Yeah.
He was in the path of the storm, and they said that they set up prayer meetings all along the path of the storm.
No, I've not heard this.
And when that came towards the coast, it just sort of petered right out. That does not surprise me, because I've seen that in my own life with weather, Doug. I've seen weather. I remember the time I was with a youth group, Doug. I don't know what this would be, miracles, or because sometimes weather things are very interesting. And we were at a Christian concert, Doug. It was called Alive back in, I think, the middle '90s or something. My daughter was still a little young teenager. We had about 21 kids, and they were all young. And about midnight, right about there were Jars of Clay was playing. Petra was playing, the last band that were playing. And suddenly they announced, "You guys better get out of here. There's 4 tornadoes coming from the west, coming to the east, and right in our direction." And oh my gosh, 10,000 people were coming out of there. And I started going out. But suddenly, Doug, I got this, I believe, a holy anger. Oh, yeah.
And I got mad that Christians were so afraid. I don't mean to be Christians to be stupid, but I got this, the Lord told me very clearly, I am the Lord of the storm. Use my name, and I will stand for you.
Did a peace be still a little more?
I did. I said, well, what I did is I went to the camp that we were camping out. We had 3 vans, or was it 2 vans? No, it's 1 big van and a car. I think there might have been another car, I can't remember, but there was about 21 of us. And basically, I said, tear all the tents down. But here's the thing, if we leave right now, we're going to go directly into the face of where the storm is coming from, number one. Number two, it's darker. There's about 5,000 automobiles going pell-mell all over the place, and a couple thousand of them at least are going to go our direction. It's going to be rainy and slippery. I said, I don't know whether this is a good idea. Let's pray against the storm. And you should see, Doug, the dark, it was so dark, getting really dark, and you could see the leaves, they were turning upside down, getting ready for the storm to hit, and you couldn't see it. And I just prayed against the storm with everyone there. And right after that, the leaves turned down, the wind it got real quiet, and the leaves turned down, and then the dark opened up, and the moonlight came down.
Wow.
And I said, now I want you guys to sleep in the van. I'm going to sleep in my tent. I'm not tearing my tent down. And, but I want you guys to be ready. I don't want to be stupid about this. And I said, I want you to be safe. If we see something, we can know which way to go. But right now, we're kind of, no matter what we do, it's going to be wrong. But I had a good night's sleep, Doug. And the next day, it was bright. It was the bluest, brightest day I've ever seen. And there was 3 young girls. I said, we've never seen anything like that. I says, you as Christians have authority that you don't even realize. It's not to be used with impunity, but the Lord will give you wisdom or knowledge to know what to do. And that was what I think was part of that. And that's the thing, a lot of these miracles, Doug, segue into one another. It's almost like a seamless thing, like a branch from a vine. Where does one leave off and the other begin? You're not always quite sure, but that was an amazing thing that happened in my life in the about 1996, I think. I'm trying to think exactly when that was.
A lot of these things are personal stories and personal things that happen to us, and many of times they're so personal that you can't really describe them or share them with other people, right? Because they're specifically just for you.
That's true. Yep.
And that's I think something that helps people in their faith when God enters into your life in such a way that and it's like Dr. Damanian and his experience. He said that was exactly what we needed right at that particular moment for us to get that magnet built and build the very first MRI.
Doug, the thing that I think about those kinds of things. I remember Laney Johnson, the inventor of arthroscopic surgery. He was a Lansing boy, made good really, but he told many of us. I talked to him years ago. I don't really know him that well. I mean, I've acquainted him. It's been a long time. I'm not even sure. Is he still alive, Doug? Do you know?
I think he's still alive.
Yeah, he's getting up there. But this is what 35 years ago. But he said the Lord really gave him kind of a vision of how to put this arthroscopic surgery thing together. And now it's used for all kinds of things. But he did it for knees when it first started out, but now they use it for shoulders and even beginning to use it for heart surgeries now, Doug. It's an amazing, amazing thing. But the Lord gives revelation to his people. Again, Doug, we see the results of these things. But are we going to be able to test the fact that he had a vision? Even the most secular person knows there are times when you get revelation. That's because God the Father isn't working in us, even if you don't accept his Son. He still loves all humanity. But these supernatural gifts often they're always given only to the church. Right. These particular ones. And we talk about miracles would be like walking on water,
right? Yeah.
Turning water into wine, multiplying of food. Those guys, we saw those, Jesus did all those. But in modern days, I've heard of stories like that. But Doug, would you call a raising of the dead a miracle or a healing?
Well,
see, that's where it gets dicey,
Right. If guy's head was chopped off,
that would be a miracle.
Miracle.
I mean, but I will tell you something. When my mother, she passed away in 2009, but she was just was having a lot of health issues. My mom had lots of health issues, but one of the major ones for about 15 years, she had been wearing, maybe at least 15 years, a back brace on and off until lately she was wearing it all the time because they told her
bone on bone, right?
She had bone on bone in her vertebrae. They told her, we could try to operate, but at that time, this was back in the early 70s, you would have a 95% chance of getting paralyzed. Mm-hmm. So otherwise we'd have to deal with back brace and a lot of Mother's Little Helper, the Rolling Stone song, tranquilizers, the pain pills. And she came to one of these prayer meetings, Doug. Remember Barb Moon? And we'll give you a couple of them. I probably shouldn't give names out of it. Barb's basement, and there were a bunch of people there, Carol, and a bunch of people, friends of ours. And I was working at Kmart. I was a young 20-something, maybe 21.
Oh, I was there too,
Were you I didn't realize if you were at the prayer. Were you there?
I
So you were actually in the basement, and I was walking down the basement. And you can describe maybe from your perspective, but I'm coming down there. All of a sudden, I saw my mom lift her head up like this. They were all praying like in a circle. It's kind of the meeting was kind of getting over, and she lifted her head up, dropped her hands down, and you could see people. I could see people around her, kind of going, trying to stay in prayer, but they're going, what's going on? And then my mom took her brace off and did a toe touch, and she had not. And people go, what's going? And she goes, I feel like I stepped in a bath of water, and all of a sudden, you remember that?
I see that expression on her face, or it just was like a whole bath of honey going over.
Well, she went over. It's like, yeah, you step into a warm bath when you're cold, and all that tingle that goes up. And she said it went up and down. He said, I have no pain, no pain. Remember that? And what's interesting, my mom also had some arthritic issues going on. And suddenly she was moving her hands, but she was able to do that toe touch. I remember that. And then what's neat about this, the follow-up to the story, Doug, is she believed she had a miracle. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind, or is that a healing? Well, that was a restoration of something that wasn't there. Because what happened was, Doug, about a year later, she was going down to see my brother Steve get married down in Florida. And on the way back up, they hit a bad rainstorm. This is back when they had bias ply tires, not radial tires. And the car did a spin out. Went through the median, went on the other side, spun around. Thank God there was no other cars coming the other direction. And they're all kind of shaken up. They were okay. So they said, well, so they drove back across there. But when they got home, the insurance guy said to my mom, no, we want everyone to get x-rays to make sure there's no whiplash or hairline fractures. Well, the disc that was not there was now there. And that was an amazing, amazing thing. These are things that have happened, and I can't ask you as an audience to believe. I'm just telling you, these are things I know we had that happened to us. Doug, that would be a gift of miracles now. And then there were things that just happened throughout my mom's life that were just amazing. There was this, again, a word of knowledge or a word of wisdom. I don't know, but when she was in Alan Vicky Kai's basement or house, and Alan Vicky's mother was there. I think it was Vicky's mom was there, and she had she had been sent home from the hospital, Doug. She had 4 days left to live. Mm-hmm. My mom was in the middle of the living room with Alan, Vicky, and me. Suddenly, she just very slowly just went down into the ground. In charismatic circles, oftentimes they call it being slain in the spirit. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of hucksterism that maybe goes on with it, but when it's the real thing, there's nothing like it. And they were kind of scared. Did she have a heart attack? And something going on? We did not know what this was. She was just smiling. Doug, she just kind of, she didn't look like she was hurt in pain. About 10 minutes later, whatever, she gets up, she goes, and her mother was sleeping in the living room. She says, you will not die. You have 10 more years to live. And that's exactly how long she lived, okay? I was walking with Jesus on a beach. These are kinds of things, Doug. You talk about personal things. I was witness to some of this stuff, and there's amazing things that goes on there, Doug. That's a word of a revelation of knowledge, you know?
Well, it's interesting that many of our creationist friends who are sola scriptura.
Sola scriptura, yeah.
And they're very Baptistic or Reformed or whatever.
We call them cessationist, oftentimes.
They seem to sort of want to put these over on a shelf someplace and not talk about them because they don't know how to deal with it. Well,
it isn't scientific, Doug. It's not.
It's Fuji-Wuji stuff to them, and then it does seem like that in many cases. But when you experience the blessings of the Lord of this sort, it's hard not to talk about it.
It really is. In fact, when you look at the New Testament, so much is supernatural. We're not saying everything's supernatural. Look, my mother eventually passed away. We're saying the fall of man is still very relevant, even to Christians with miracles. The miracles of this body, every miracle that deals with this temporary life here is temporary, except being born of the Spirit. It's the only one that's permanent. Now, there are two more we didn't talk about. Two more controversial ones. Well, three of them. We have tongues, prophecy, and interpretation.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and all of those, we call those the vocal gifts. The other, wisdom and knowledge are vocal as well. And there's a lot of talking, a lot of doctrine based on those things. But I'll tell you, Doug, the Bible tells you the tongues are a sign for the unbeliever. But when everyone's speaking in tongues, it can be a lot of jabberjawing. It can seem very crazy, so that it makes unbelievers want to go away. So he wants to have, Paul says, wants interpretation in a church setting if you can get one. But the neat thing about it, Doug, again, a personal experience. Had a gal speaking it out, speaking in tongues, and she just felt unclean. She ran out of that room. About within a month, she was really saved and filled with the Spirit herself, because it was so obviously supernatural and revelationary. She got filled with the Spirit herself. Interpretation, and again, my mother. A lot of stuff happened with her. My mother knew a lot of languages, Doug, just by intellect. She taught French and Spanish. Was learning Italian. Learning Russian. She knew parts of it. She knew Italian, all the Romance languages. And we were at a prayer thing one time. Somebody spoke in a tongue. My mother looked at me and says, "That guy's speaking like an archaic form of like, it's kind of a Portuguese-Spanish combination, but she's saying this." And then there was an interpretation, said the exact, on the other side, there was probably 300 people in this room, and he gave the exact words my mom just told me the guy just said. Now, unless you want to tell me everything's a plant, and those who are cynical, no matter what I say, you're going to say that's what it is. The Bible gives you testimony of things that are very, very hard to accept. But if you don't, you're going to leave out half the Bible, like Thomas Jefferson tried to do with cutting the miracles out.
And we'll admit that these three gifts, all of these gifts have their misuses.
They do, and there are counterfeits of them.
Yes.
Okay? There are devilish things that happen to it.
Well, that's where discernment comes into
That's
play.
very good. Yes, Doug.
And if you have the discernment, if you know Jesus and spend time with Him, spend your prayer time, and you read the Word and you understand what He's like, who He is about, and how He works, you will learn the voice of the Lord versus the voice of other spirits.
One thing, we only got about a minute left, Doug. I did want to touch on slightly the difference between prophecy and knowledge. I think knowledge, you talk about that personal thing, knowledge seems to be a personal revelation for someone that needs help. But sometimes it's more general. Prophecy is about God interacting with His people, speaking what He wants them to see.
Right, yeah.
It's an oracle. It's not always predictive, although what it is, it's right on. It better be right on. It's basically oftentimes getting the church to get off their duff and get moving. It's telling them to, it encourages them, it warns them, it challenges them, and it exhorts them to move. It's about action, okay? Tongues is a very personal thing too. It's self-edification. Prophecy is for the body of Christ at large, but it is very supernatural. When you say that's why Paul really commended that gift as much as anything. He wanted to have that. So I just wanted to touch on that slightly. Those are three really vocal gifts. So
tongue seems to be a key to a lot of it.
It is,
because it gives you a prayer language to talk with the Lord.
the only gift I think given that Paul talks about self-edification. I think it's kind of unique in that. All the rest of them are for the church. Well,
we'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution. We hope you enjoyed our show.